Wow, Danny, what an amazing space you have here.
Yeah, there's a lot of it too. This is the sort of more gallery space where when things are finished down in the studio, we bring them up here to keep them from getting destroyed and actually call them finished. And then we get a chance to light things and see how things look. It's kind of the easel, if you will. Once it's gotten to this stage, you can really look at it and see.
Wow.
And then glass is just a bizarre material when you think of it. This is a very rare optical glass, an incredibly expensive material, very heavy.
It's got lots of bubbles in it.
And we just melted all of these pieces together, machined and polished it. Glass is incredible because it's a material that throws no shadow. The Romany Gypsy word for glass means sand and light. So it's immaterial material.
Can I try that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Whoa. Amazing.
So this may end up, I think I'm going to turn this into a table and make a lovely piece because...
So you don't know beforehand what it's going to be?
Not really. I mean, I do a lot of creative play. We just try different things. And, things break. I love the way glass breaks. And I'll leave it here to make sure I can really believe in it and support it, like this big smiling crack here that just broke and a piece of marble. Things fused together, morphing material.
Yeah.
It's very technical glass, and people get very frightened and extremely precious. This is, in fact, one of the smallest things that I make, which is actually a glass bowl, and it spins. You fill it with water, put a rose in it, and I've made not hundreds, but probably about 50 of those over the years. And then a big, large table made out of steel and glass. This is a strange black glass that happened by accident. It sat around the studio for years, and then I've formed it into this table. This is going to a client in the States now.
Is that hammered or how's that?
Yeah, it's interesting you say that because this has been cut with a hammer. I actually hit it because if you think glass breaks, it's the thing that people are so frightened of. And it's been something I've really tried to show that and expose that because it's the nuances, the flaws in things that are so much part of their nature, just like people, really. And then there's a blue version of it. There's a little man. When they first invented water jet, they took this piece of slate and had that water jet cut. Now it's something quite common, easy to do, but this was cut by water jet.
Wow.
Lovely sound. And this is a glass bench. It's kind of like a plank, and we call it Max Planck. And now, for instance, look at that. You can actually, who would think? And so people are quite frightened of glass.
Yeah.
That fear element's very important in it. You see, I think.
Where does fear come into it, do you think?
Well, I think fear is always present, I don't mind fear. Anxiety I'm not so fond of. But fear is actually something that centers you. It brings you into the here and now. It really brings life forces through. Everybody works to cushion life, to avoid things that are slightly scary. Whereas that edge, I think for artists is quite important.
Yeah.
To work on the edge of your fear.
Were you fearful when you were doing this cast?
Yeah, you just don't know where it's going, and you could end up wasting a lot of time on material. And these pieces, which is reasonably new work, these are, I call them carve casts because they take big blocks of plaster and cut into them very freely, using an angle grinder, really like a Chinese brush, and gestures, and then put tons of glass on them, melt it in, and hope for the best. And some of them work out, some.
That was so much more precise.
But
This method of.
I do a lot of quite large architectural pieces, and this was a test for something that would go in front of as a divider in a building, something where we have about 30 or 40 of these. And as you can see, because they're Toblerones, they actually have a prismatic value.
Yeah, capture the light.
They capture the light quite beautifully.
It's steel behind you. That's
Yeah.
different.
And this, again, it's really a drawing, if you will. It's something where we've taken an RSJ, and we've got some very curious toys where we can heat metal. And what a pleasure that is after glass, because working with glass for, half a quarter of a century or whatever, to work into steel. So each of these things, they have a different quality. Glass is very much from the heart up. Steel's much more, got guts of iron. Steel has a whole different feeling. Wood is something different. So all of these materials have a kind of resonance or meaning to people. And it's quite important.
And talking about meaning, what gets you up in the morning when you want to make these?
The alarm bell.
Yeah.
No, I just work every day. So basically, I come in, I ride the canal from Maida Vale up here, and then we start there. We had 2 or 3 people who were working with. Of course, during COVID, everything's shut down, so I've been on my own pretty much. So this is quite interesting. But yeah, I'll show you out in the yard. Would you like to have a look?
Yeah.
It's very nice out here. That's my little paradise out here. So come and see. Here, this is. What's interesting, see this one here? Fear.
Exactly, fear. It's all in the mind.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really interesting the different materials that you had, and then the metal, and then I was like, oh, that's so precious. And you think of art as being this very precious thing, but then you're kind of banging it and breaking it and making sounds and resonating sounds with it, and I found that really quite liberating as in a studio visit. To be able to interact and not worry about anything breaking or moving or.
How cool. Yeah. It's very important. That fear issue is, as we know now with COVIDation and all of these things, that of course fear, what we perceive as fear, is many. There are different levels of it, and some of it really belongs there and is really important. It keeps us from.
Because fear is made for a reason, isn't it? It's to stop you from falling off a cliff or burning yourself, but actually.
It also leads to a kind of conditioning that leads towards people it blocks people. They're scared and they won't try things, and they build lots of cushions to keep themselves safe in life. And really it's important, certainly for most of us artists, as we heard from Joe as well, to move through that fear, and there's something on the other side of it.
Yeah, the other side of fear. There's some people say that what is there on the other side of fear, would you say, in your experience?
Well, I think, they used to put guardians at the gateway, these terrific monsters, in Babylon or whatever. They had the two scary things that are at
the pyramids in Babylon.
And they
even in churches today, they have them.
Yeah, and I think they scare the ego. They frighten the ego, and if you get terrified of that, don't mess with it. If you don't know what diddy wah diddy means by now, don't mess with it really. So I
mean, when you that is again in the mind, so it's interesting when you talk about glass, because the meaning of glass is sand and what is the spiritual.
The Romani Gypsy word for glass actually means sand and light. So it's material and immaterial. I suppose we could say light is material, but we don't really think of it that way. And when you think of it, glass glass has a quality of dimension. I mean, we can
Don't break. I mean, there's lots of breakable glass, but I love this. I love this.
Yes.
That one there as well. Yeah.
I mean, we can see through it. It doesn't really throw a shadow. And
but it distorts reality in a way, or it creates another dimension, doesn't it? Because
it's a really magical material. It's prismatic, and yet the material breaks.
Yeah.
And that's where the fear comes in, is that we're scared to break it. And generally, glass has been treated so preciously, whereas part of its characteristic is the fact that it breaks.
Yeah.
And it reveals something quite beautiful. In the 80s, when a lot of this started, or my work first really began in glass, it really started around breaking it. And it's been a hard thing to lose, because it really is one of its major characteristics. And when you crack it, it gets all sorts of interesting patterns and feathers along there. And when you think of that break, or that fracture, there's a parallel in people. Like, what is a person, who's perfect? There's been so much energy put into rendering material, and controlling material quite perfectly. Whereas a lot of the techniques in glass that are not hot techniques, like blowing or melting, are destructive, and you actually have to break it to release this quality and this energy. And I think that the metaphor in materials, I think there's an ancient tradition to think of where materials, how we respond to them. I mean, people talk about having guts of iron, a heart of glass. Glass definitely sits between this area and this area, and it might be esoterically linked to the heart and throat chakra and these. So it is a remarkable material.
And that one also, the kind of long pole. You look through and it's like a different.
And this is quite extraordinary.
I love that.
You see, you get this.
Yeah, look at you.
Quite strange. And then, of course, if we do like this, you get a whole kaleidoscope. Have a look through there.
Yeah, let's see. Hold on. Oh yeah, wow, that's amazing. That's another reality. Can I pass it along? Is that all right? Can I pass it to? Can I pass it? Yeah, there you go. Everyone can experience it.
And so a lot of the glass that I use is actually just very thick window glass. It's industrial glass. And traditionally, this wasn't a province of artists. This was tended to be only used in architecture. And I love the way in glass factories, this material, in fact, a lot of the work that I do has hundreds of layers of glass.
Yeah, like your sculpture here, that's broken glass.
That's right.
So many different layers of it. And it's kind of a statement of broken is beautiful as well.
Yeah.
And actually sometimes more beautiful than the thing that is too controlled. So because the breakage has this chaotic element that is life essence in itself, and it has its own beauty, which brings in the randomness of creativity.
Hello, you've said it all for me. It's so true. I think that again, it's this flaw, or this wildness that also has this danger. I mean, you do have to treat this glass with respect. And something that I've one of the things that I've worked with a lot is building constructions out of hundreds of layers of glass.
Yeah.
And glass is actually stronger in compression and structurally than granite.
Really?
Or concrete, far stronger.
I'm so surprised by that fact.
So that, and so a lot of these sculptures that the larger works that
like
I'm
this
doing,
table here, I mean, that is.
Yeah, I mean the legs, things like this here, are what you call post-tensioned, and we shish kebab the glass in hundreds of pieces layered together, and then bolt it with what's called a torque wrench, and we tighten it effectively. It's like putting a car on top of it. And it doesn't break. So if you know the rules of this, and this has gone on endlessly in my work, and we.
Yeah. Is it through experimenting that you figure this out?
Yeah.
And has anyone taught it to you, or do you just try it out and see what happens?
And in fact, I probably am the inventor of that, because people had layered glass and bonded it together before, and I was just lazy. I couldn't imagine gluing all of these things, so I just drilled holes in it and bolted it like Lego.
Oh, how cool!
And then when we did this project in the Victoria and Albert a few years ago, we had to do laboratory tests to prove to the structural engineer that this would work.
For the health and safety, and make sure that
Totally. Yeah. And we took a 6-inch cube of glass, like they destruction test concrete.
Yeah.
And the press in the laboratory couldn't break it.
Really?
So,
wow.
I mean, it must have gone, to hundreds of tons compression.
Yeah.
So that proved certain things, and then everything was derived from there. So then the science came into it. And so for quite a long time, I made very large works.
Because this is public art installations here. Yeah. And outdoor versus indoor, how do you manage that? Outdoor installations and indoor, commissions per se. Yeah. Is there a different method, or is it the same thing in different contexts? And because there's the idea of space and relationship to the public and to the viewer that is quite different. And internal space, it's an intimate relationship with the piece of work, whereas outdoor, it's a public. People are passing by and you want them to stop and look. How does that condition your way of creating it, or does it just? It
does, and in fact, it's a little bit of a nightmare. In fact, I think when I, in the sort of my mid years, or in my 30s, or from the 80s into the 90s, I made a lot of very large sculpture, and I probably took on the role, sort of managerial role, much more like an architect or a designer, and it meant drawing all of these things up, calculating them, having them engineered, making sure that the thing would last and not fall apart in 20 years. And that became, I think, creatively for a lot of the part of us as artists, is a kind of compression on that. It's really boring, and it's tedious, but it enables you to do quite large things. And quite beautiful things, because the scale issue, like these large walls of this piece, by the way, is called Whole Apart. And if you see the negative space in there, is actually the same as the positive space. And
interesting, negative versus positive space.
The empty.
Empty is the negative.
Yeah, empty is the space in between, let's say, and then is the same shape as the glass itself.
Is it?
And
that's
and
true.
These are very simple,
beautiful,
very simple structural games. And it's called Whole Apart, because the space in between. Yeah.
Oh, So that's very spiritual. I think there's a lot of spirituality in your work. From talking to you, there's the kind of craft and the very physical aspect of the work, but there's also a kind of ephemeral spiritual side to it.
It's sometimes hard to talk about that, because it's something, spirituality is so individual and so personal, and yet it is universal.
Yeah.
But if you think of the whole thing of a creative act, and most artists experience this, our processes are bizarre. Each artist is completely different, and you follow an internal guidance, which is highly individual, and yet it's coming from something that we don't even know. We use our reason, but we also follow our hearts, and that's extremely important. Now, with materials, I mean, if you think of materials, glass is synonymous with light.
Look at the light coming through this. That's astounding.
And again, I've worked with this sort of fracture image quite a lot. And there's certain things that happen in there that you have to really experience in film or in an actual seeing a piece personally, because it's the way it moves and how the light moves in these things. So,
And so for you, looking forward to like the next phase, because you've got the most amazing studio space with all these different massive machines, and you've got the kind of large scale machines, and then you've got the kind of more what is the next phase? Do you see has this kind of quiet time of making shifted your perception, and do you have a new trajectory, or are you going on the same flow path that you were always going to do? Or?
Well, like all of us, there's always this factor of money, of being
Yeah,
able to
exactly.
support
Earning a living
oneself
as an artist. It's
and
no.
pay for the rent, which is
Yeah.
a really major issue. So I do a lot of work on commission, which oftentimes comes from a sort of back catalog of forms.
Is
But
that-
I'm fortunate in that I'm able to experiment quite a lot. So what I've done after many years of layering glass, I've gone into melting glass, and I take.
Do you do that at your studio? Melt glass.
Yeah, and we actually melt the glass into huge plaster molds.
Wow.
And I'm trying to find methods again that have this freedom, this spontaneity of painting.
Yes.
My history or my training was in painting. I studied painting here in London at the Central School of Art, and was fortunate to work around visionaries like Cecil Collins and then the sculptor Bill Turnbull. They were both tutors of mine when I was a student.
Oh, great.
And out of that, I've looked to find a way of actually drawing with glass.
Because this looks like a painting to me in many ways.
It's like a
you know?
huge watercolor, isn't it?
Yeah,
And-
and there's that fluidity within the glass. It is, yes.
Yeah.
The colors,
Yeah.
painting with glass.
And what you have here, that is basically like a picture plane. It distorts the image behind. So as you walk by it, all of these big discs of color flicker and move.
Yeah,
And so it's really a kind of physics.
yeah.
This is an area that I definitely want to expand on. It's very important as well. I think there are a few things about being able to draw in the material. So the plaster work, which I'm doing now, where I carve into the plaster gesturally with angle grinders and different tools
Yeah.
to try and get that same freedom that you get with a brush.
Yeah.
It's one of the things in sculpture that the materials are quite unforgiving, and there's a lot of inertia
Yes.
in working. I'm not a conceptual artist. I'm really a perceptual artist.
Yes, you figure it as you're
Yeah,
working.
as I'm working with both steel and glass, and so a lot of it has to do with tricking forms out of there, trying to get something that hasn't been done before. There's no point in discovering penicillin twice, and so one always wants to be operating a little bit in the frontier of
Yes.
things. And so some of the things I'm trying are really unprecedented in carving into plaster molds and then melting forms into them. And it's very slow experimental work, which this time has been very, very good for, because I have practically no people working in the studio now, vast space, and really have time to experiment and try these different things. But we continue to get commissions. So in fact, the commissioning thing is quite interesting because, like Joe was saying, he works outside of the sort of gallery,
Yes.
gallery system, and has never fit into that. I'm a little bit in the same mold. I mean, there's some pieces that I can show in galleries, but a lot of it, really, the scale of things depends on clients. So in the commissioning process, I've been very fortunate in that my clients are quite adventurous. And the commission becomes like a dialogue between myself, the client, and the space. Because I think it's an act of arrogance to just project onto somebody.
What you think, yeah.
Yeah, that it's a product. It's and it's an ancient tradition that as well as working into utilitarian objects. Like I still make a lot of works that are furniture pieces as well.
So that combination between utilitarian and art.
Yeah.
How do you combine that? I think we're going to end the conversation really on this point about what is art and use,
Yes.
and do they combine sometimes or not, or how do you feel about that?
No, I definitely lean in the art end of things. I mean, this object does have a function. It's the entrance of General Motors headquarters in Detroit, and it makes a statement. It has a certain impact when people walk in, because they had a problem in the architecture, didn't know quite what to do, and they invited me to design something that would address various issues there. So art does actually have a function. it's there to elevate the human spirit.
Yeah.
And that's really
That's right.
what we're all about here.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, thank you for coming to talk to us today about art and
Thank
about
you.
your creative process. You've been amazing.
Yeah.
And thanks for
Blessed.
inspiring us
Yeah.
all, for
And-
seeing worlds in a different way.
And may I say that Kensington and Chelsea and this Art Week and what you and the whole team are doing is just so fantastic. We don't get here without you.
Oh,
and
thank you.
And you as an artist, it's an act of sensitive generosity, which really we're all very grateful that you're doing this work. It's extremely important.
Oh, thank
So
you.
thank you
Touched.
all very
Thank
much.
you. Thank you. Thanks for that, Danny.
Thank you.
That was such a great
I am-
conversation. It's always a great conversation with you. It's always an inspiring, good conversation. Yeah.
I'm
You're
always
very
nervous.
vocal. No, you didn't come across as nervous at all.
nervous.
No, you were really natural and came up, some really good points were made.
I hope so. Well, you ask good questions. So. No, but it is fantastic. Keep it going. Are you going to keep doing this?